Welcome aboard. Vinyl Happy Hour is here, guys. This is season 5, I believe episode 14, I always forget, but I've got some special reissues of all sorts. Reissues from 50 years ago up to last year that have some very special packaging, most on color vinyl too, or just something interesting that we want to share with you. So join in for a little talk about 5 records that I'm picking for this week to share with you. I'm Skylar Davis, owner of Culture Shock Clothing and Records here in Rockford, Illinois. Also of cultureshockshop.com, where you can find the records we're talking about tonight, hopefully if they're not sold out already by the time you're watching this video. Let's see here. So let's just start by talking about the vinyl industry being so backed up with things like that, and so many good new bands putting out records. What's tying that up somewhat is a lot of reissues of older albums and stuff like that. But here's one that might have went under the radar for some of you that just came out only a year ago. Amyl the Sniffers, which is this Australian just rockin', just garage rock, psychedelic rock, punk rock band, heavy rock. This album, Comfort to Me, is such a good album. This is actually, I think, their 3rd album. Everything they've done so far is awesome. But this came out a year ago. This is the 2022 reissue of Comfort to Me. They did printed inner sleeves. This has a lot of other specialty stuff going on. It's the deluxe edition. So it's the regular album on smoky clear vinyl, as you can see here. And then you also get a poster inside. You get a second album of, let's show off this little poster first of the band. Amy is the singer's name. Amyl the Sniffers is what they go by. That's like almost like a slang for poppers or whatever, amyl nitrate. So a drug, they're an Australian band, but what really appeals to me is just the riot girl, raucous attitude of it. It's like AC/DC, Iggy Pop, stuff like that mixed in with it too. And then you also get, sorry, I forgot to finish saying, the second disc is a live set from Williamstown of the album played completely live. Such a cool album, cool packaging. So if you missed out on it originally, which I think the regular version is still available if you just want the regular single LP, but I love that this double LP comes with a live set, the poster, and all that good stuff. I'm sharing a link in the video below. If you go to cultureshockshop.com in the link to our staff picks, we have this up for sale, and you can choose in-store pickup or, you know, shipping anywhere in the 48 states as well. Or if you can find the single LP if you don't want all the extras, but I mean, the extras are just cool. I would go with the deluxe one myself. The album is that worthy. So we're talking about reissues this week. I mean, I've got there's of course Doja Cat, and I don't know, but there's a bunch of new stuff that just came out too, a bunch of new releases. So we got a huge amount. But I just kind of want to talk about the variety of reissues that are out there on the market and how interesting it is, how much stuff is available. This next one is, well, you would think it's about as obscure as it could get. The Travellin band from 1970. This is a Japanese psychedelic rock band, and their take on rock and roll music is just so mesmerizing to me. It's so interesting. This label, Future Shock, did 500 copies as a 2022 reissue of this album, Travellin Band Anywhere. There's only 500 copies of this that were pressed, and it's a pretty crazy album. It's pretty cool because they have a little bit of a jam rock and harmonica intro and a harmonica jam little outro, but this is all cover songs. And what's really cool is not just are you getting rock and roll psychedelic cover songs from, like, you know, Black Sabbath and stuff, and 21st Century Schizoid Man from King Crimson, and House of the Rising Sun, but you get Louisiana Blues, and it's titled to McKinley Morganfield, and that is Muddy Waters. So there's like a 13-minute jam of that with just crazy guitar. They've got harmonica in some songs too, but of course they're singing in English, but you can still tell their Japanese dialect and accent and stuff like that. But they're just going off the chains, just kind of blues rocking and riffing and playing hard, playing heavy. So I love to tie in a drink for some reason to whatever I'm doing. And I was like, I wanted to get an Australian whiskey because of Amyl the Sniffers being Australian. I don't have any, and I didn't run out to get any. So I was like, that Comfort to Me album, let's have some Southern Comfort tonight with some Coke. I thought that was good. Plus, it's a Louisiana drink. It's a New Orleans, you know, drink, and you got Louisiana Blues, the Muddy Waters song on this album. Originals of this stuff, of course, are really tough to come by. But the Travellin Band, just a really cool Japanese psych rock band from the 70s. and they're kind of doing their take on what they felt was going on in the rock and roll and psychedelic industry. And I think that they were a little bit kind of shut off from the rest of the world. A lot of the Japanese bands of that era weren't doing the whole big rock and roll thing, but you could definitely hear influences of Cream and Black Sabbath and things like that on this band. So Flower Travellin band, there's not a lot of copies, so get it, snag it if you can. It's pretty interesting. So that's kind of the breadth of reissues, starting with bands that are as recent as last year's release. This takes me back to a little bit of my youthful years of getting into metal. This was a 2001 release from the band Chimaira, Pass Out of Existence. They did get lumped in the new metal thing a little bit, I guess, but Run Out Groove did this first time on vinyl reissue. It's kind of a blue marbled vinyl, and kind of like that Amyl the Sniffers, this is a triple LP though, instead of a double, but the third disc has a live set from 2002 that had never been released on vinyl, of course, too. Chimaira, though, this is a very pummeling, just heavy album. Run Out Groove did a great job with the reissue of this. There's some extra demos and stuff, too. It's a nice big old gatefold triple LP. I'll show that off in a second. But anyway, these guys, I saw them. They toured and played with a lot, like American Head Charge, El Nino, Lamb of God, Death Clock, Fear Factory, all that stuff. So they do kind of fall into that. But this is heavy. This is like heavy Slayer riffing mixed with the speed and the intensity of like Fear Factory. Oh, plus I loved how like the samples and stuff like that had a lot of bass drops and just a lot of cool sound effects going on with the twin, thrashing heavy metal guitars, just aggressive screams too, a lot of screaming vocals. Of course, fans of, anything from Slipknot and Fear Factory and stuff like that to Slayer and stuff should totally get into Chimaira. They never quite got as big, I feel like, as they could have, but this is from that classic era, early 2000s metal and hardcore and other stuff where vinyl was kind of scarce and hard to get. So this is a triple LP set. The other thing too, I forgot how many they made, but these are limited in number. They did like a foil stamping on the back. So it says what number. I've got number 824. What number did you get? So it's really cool, those little detail to attention that you get with all these nice quality pressings, nice thick jacket. A lot of things too I forgot to mention are coming with downloads and stuff too if you want to have the MP3 download of it. But yeah, Pass Out of Existence from here still holds up, still super heavy, still super brutal. Let's go talk about some other stuff too. This is part of the Blue Note Classic series. This was also a 1970 release from Brother Jack McDuff, Moon Rappin. This is a funky piece of music on the Blue Note record label, who was known for a lot more like that New York sounded jazz and stuff like that. A lot of hard bop and post bop and free jazz even. This is totally different, and I love how it feels like the original Blue Note jazz records. It's a nice thick piece of wax, all analog cut, all audiophile cut. This is part of the Blue Note Classic series, which it actually is a gatefold, it's not the super thick. Pressed in Germany. This is through Coherent Audio, I believe. Yeah, Kevin Gray did the mastering on it. It's all analog mastering. This Brother Jack McDuff album, Moon Rappin', it's just so cool. And it just proves to me how a lot of the Blue Note artists and a lot of the jazz artists from that early era had an ear, had a sound, and created and molded the music that was going to happen and going to come in the future. Earlier jazz, of course, that's when, people were smoking the jazz cabbage and you had all the beat kids hanging around them, and the college people kind of expanding their minds and listening to that far out jazz and stuff, which ultimately led to a lot of rock. It's the roots of rock and roll, honestly, the roots of psychedelic, free jazz and improvisational jazz and prog rock and all that stuff and fusion all melded together. This is more funk though. This is funky. Brother Jack McDuff is jamming on the organ, and the organ is just ripping solos throughout the songs. But I don't know, I'm going to look up and see who's all in the band, but there's funky bass lines too, heavy drumming, and a lot of guitar riffing too, which is unusual for Blue Note. You don't hear a lot of that. Most of the Blue Note record label had more like 3, 4, 5-piece jazz bands, keeping it more traditional with, usually 2 horns and piano and bass, stuff like that. But to have guitars and drums and stuff like that, like a full band kit drum, not just a little tappy zazzy drum, this is a far out album. And honestly, it's funk. This, to me, even though there's no, words to it, kind of predicted what was going to happen with this zazzed out funk and even some of the, even later on hip hop and stuff like that, I think that ended up coming in. You know, I mean, he is rapping, you know, you got Flat Backin', Obligato, Moon Rappin', Made in Sweden, and Loosefoot. There's just something so cool about this album and so different coming out of 1970 that predicted the funk before the funk and disco stuff was ever happening and before the hip hop scene was happening, you know? I mean, it's pretty amazing. And obviously, the other reason I'm really happy about these reissues, not only do they sound good and look good, but originals are so hard to find. You know, later, especially this era in Blue Note, they weren't pressing in huge amounts or huge quantities. And originals are super pricey if you can find them. And then heartbreaking if you can find them and they're not in good shape or don't play well. So, super cool job on the classic series from Blue Note. This one I don't have an open copy. I just want to show off kind of another thing that's happening with like these expanded reissues. This is a classic album from The Clash, Combat Rock, and it has triple LP. It's got the People's Hall live show, and you've got some unreleased tracks on the third album. So really nice thick packaging on it, and there's all the extras with like this Obi strip going across the top to kind of tell you all the extras that are coming with it. Such a great album though. Combat Rock, I mean, Know Your Rights, Car Jammin', Should I Stay or Should I Go, Rock the Casbah, Straight to Hell. Gosh, there's so many good songs on this album. Like the whole album is just a great album. And let's see, what was this, late 70s? So, you know, this was a 2013 issue where Sony had released all the extras, but this is just now coming out on vinyl. It had been digital only at first, so very nice to see all that extra stuff. I just want to throw in one little extra, just a little personal piece I picked up because we're always getting used records, and even though used records aren't on our website, you can find them in the store. And this one's probably going to stay in my personal collection though, but I just thought I'd show off this Robbie Basho. Venus and Cancer. There is some nudity on there, so graphic warning. It's small, I'm sure you can't even see it. But this is just another kind of a far out piece, 1970 I believe. A cool rarity on the Blue Thumb release, and this is just some very kind of minimal guitar, kind of finger picking and folk. It's got a mixture of that Middle Eastern and that folky style of music. It's just a very meditative piece, just a kind of a rare, kind of a pricey piece too. I had never seen a copy, and all the records that I've looked through, it's in pretty decent shape for being an old used record. It came in a collection of, you know, mostly rock stuff. And I was like, wow, this is very enjoyable. So it's nice to find those really obscure things, both in the used section and in the new releases. There's stuff getting reissued that I thought I would never see, and just stuff that's kind of out there. So I was like, oh, let's show this off. It's kind of cool. Keep your eyes peeled, you know, when you're looking for the used section, and give something a listen. Like, I didn't know what that was. I put it on and played it, and I just kind of fell in love with it. It was just what I needed. So yeah, so many great things coming out. Obviously, we should do the show on Thursday nights, but records actually came in late. There's so much going on. Probably for Record Store Day, like part 2, the releases that didn't make it out for April are coming out June 18th. So I think that's kind of messing up some of the warehouses and shipping suppliers. Also, I had to go to a concert. I had to go see Deftones and Gojira. So sorry for that, but so we got a video on Friday at least. I got a video out this week, but usually tune in and check out our YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already, and give this video a like, because every Thursday we want to give you a new vinyl happy hour and have a little drink and talk about some of the new releases and reissues that we want you to know about. So see you next week.